Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Evolving Man Summit, the summit for a wholehearted and grounded masculinity. Today, my guest is Eivind, founder of Reclaim Your Inner Throne, which is an online program for men's initiation. And I've come to appreciate Eivind's work, especially for the depth that he's been looking into archetypes. And yeah, I'm excited to have a full talk or to dive deeper into this topic since it's been coming up in other interviews as well. So yeah, Eivind, thank you for taking the time to chat with me.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
So to lay some ground for people who are not so familiar with archetypes, archetypal work, can you say a few words about what are archetypes? How can you define them?
Where to begin? Archetypes are the characters of your dreams. They are the characters of movies. They are the heroes of history and tribal cultures. They are ever present. They are in all cultures because they represent a shared human heritage that comes from some mysterious field that binds us all together, the morphic field, whatever you call it, the collective unconscious is what Jung called it. Mm-hmm. And exactly how this works in a scientific way, it's unclear. But we know now that there are ways that we are connected in very mysterious ways as humans, and that over millennia, and I would say this even started before human beings came into form in whatever way that happened, if it was Darwin or divine intervention. That this idea that cultures have had roles, warriors, leaders, kings, like magicians, medicine men, the artists, the bards, the musicians, the singers. That's not an entirely human idea. I'd say you can find traces of that even in the animal realm. Mm-hmm. But let's look at the human realm, because I think that's more relevant. So that's it's like Jung was the one that coined the term first, I believe, and he was very he was a very curious and very wise and clever guy, right? And he studied the cultures of the world, anthropological studies, and he found all of these patterns, and they have seen a bit of a renaissance in the world lately. The understanding of the importance of understanding that there are actually deep patterns, that our human heritage is actually patterned, and that the way that we show up follows certain patterns that every human being that's ever lived follows. And Jordan Peterson is the one who's responsible for bringing that wisdom back into the mainstream. So that's quite exciting to me at this stage, that more and more people are starting to talk about archetypes as if it's something, an idea that we need to engage with. Mm-hmm. And it's very very auspicious, very positive thing that is happening.
Right.
Yeah. So I work with the King, Warrior, Magician, Lover archetypes as conceptualized by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd love to get more deeply into these four in a minute. What you're saying sounds to me like, on one hand, these archetypes are imprints on our psyche in a way that have been formed throughout history, but at the same time you're saying it's also something that comes before. It's not simply the
we're born with them, right? We're born with them.
Yeah,
we don't need to develop a capacity to have these archetypes. They are intrinsic a priori patterns that every human being that pops out of the womb actually is already imprinted with. That's the idea of the collective unconscious.
Yeah.
That it's not your personal unconscious. This is deeper than that. And that means that the archetype as an energy source is a larger than human energy source, which means that it's quite a force to reckon with. And if you look at imagery from mythology, fantastic creatures like the dragon are representations of this archetypal force that lives in us all. So it's a way of sort of externalizing the idea that there is this huge fire that burns within that we need to contend with in some kind of way. And so you have the hero's journey of contending with the dragon, conquering the dragon, and in a way it's actually just a metaphor for learning to deal with the fires within so that we can become safe, mature, sovereign human beings.
Yeah, I see now. I understand better what you were saying before. You were saying that we can observe these archetypal patterns when we look at human history, but at the same time, it's like the theory is that we can see these patterns in human history because these energies already existed before humans. And so when humans came into the world, they started following these patterns. They started seeing that this...
I don't know exactly that is true. You know, I'm just speculating. I don't have any hard science about this, and I don't know if anyone does, but it does seem likely that there is a certain psychic inheritance from, like, if we believe in the evolutionary development of human being from monkeys and all of this would make even more sense. You know, that we take on the characteristics of the species from which we evolved, that we aren't suddenly just created anew as some sort of like an entirely new species. No, actually we would take on the characteristics of our ancestry. So how far back that goes, and you know, we can sit and you know, we can speak for hours about that without actually arriving at anything very useful whatsoever. So, but it's, of course, it's interesting and fascinating to think about. But ultimately, if you look at every human culture in the history of the planet, you will see that there have been roles in that culture, and it's patterned along these four archetypes: king, warrior, magician, lover. So the magician being the clergy, the shamans, the healers, the teachers, the experts, the engineers, all of that stuff. The lovers being the artists, the temple dancers, you know, the musicians, the bards, the poets. You would have the warriors, which is fairly easy for most people to understand what a warrior is. And then you have the leadership, the king. It could be a chieftain, it could be any number of things. It doesn't necessarily, even a parental figure is in some ways an embodiment of the sovereign archetype. Like the father becomes a king, you know, the mother becomes a queen in the psyche of a child.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. What I'm curious about is, and we briefly discussed this question that I have before we started the interview, that on one hand we say these archetypes live in our psyche, or we all have access to each of these archetypes.
Yeah.
And part of becoming a mature man and also a mature woman is to learn to connect to all of them.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we do have a tendency towards going to one of them that feels the most natural, the most easeful to embody them.
I think that's true. Yeah. First of all, I want to say that you don't need to proactively connect with the archetypes. They connect with you just fine. And you don't have the choice to say, I don't want to connect with the archetype.
Okay.
It keeps churning its energy at the bottom of your psyche day in, day out. There's never a way to step away from that dynamic. And at the same time, yeah, sure, you can become conscious of the connection and then facilitate the flow of that energy in a much healthier way. But to get back to your original question, I think it's true what you're saying, that we have tendencies that are maybe part of our personality in some way, that we have a personality structure which is a little bit different to archetypes, that makes us, for me, for instance, I was very, very fascinated by fairy tales and mythology when I was little. And as I grew up, I started playing role-playing games on my computer. I was never into the pen and paper version. And funnily enough, when I came to choose my character, 9 times out of 10, I would be a magician. Mm-hmm. So if you, even in this moment, for anyone who is listening, hello there, by the way, good to be here. It's cool if you've been playing computer games or role-playing games in general, just notice what kind of characters you tended to pick. Mm-hmm. If there was a pattern, that says a lot about who you are or who you conceptualize yourself to be. Mm-hmm. And I conceptualize myself to be a magician. And even to this day, that is the archetype that I feel more resonant with. Mm-hmm. But there is, well, using myself as an example, for instance, there are pros and cons, with being really identified with one of the archetypes. The pros is that I will get to access the potentials of that archetype. For instance, for me to be very skilled at facilitating personal transformation for people, for seeing patterns, for seeing people's shadows, for seeing how they are, dancing around the truth and all that. It's just like second nature for me. Mm-hmm. And who knows how it actually became this way. But at the same time, the magician archetype has a tendency to be a bit of a recluse and be a bit of a hermit, and can get quite fascinated with analysis, and can if I don't watch myself, I can sort of climb up into my tower and I will start to look at things and, oh, isn't that fascinating down there among these humans down on the ground, and so we need to be aware of these things as we in a way design our lives through an archetypal perspective. So for instance, if I want a family, if that's a real strong desire, I might want to be careful with being too obsessed with being a magician. Yeah. Not saying that it's not possible to be a magician family man, but it's less likely, right? Yeah. So, the laboratory scientist spending the whole night in the laboratory researching some, I don't know, like the atomic structure of whatever, DNA sequences, all of this stuff. And then I think about human stuff. And
right.
Then there are consequences.
And I see how that's the place where the relationship between the archetypes comes into play. So when you notice like the downside of the magician, which is to become distant in a way and not so engaged in human relationship and being an equal part of it, is that the place where you can connect to other archetypal energies or
for sure.
Remember them? And
for sure. Yeah, absolutely. There's another danger with a magician, and it's being in a chronic transformational process, chronic liminality. So you never actually step into a sort of an integrated, normal form of consciousness. A lot of people in the New Age movement are always seeing patterns and very fascinating things, and they can never eject into a normal life and actually master something as simple as paying a bill, because everything is just like magical. But For sure. And for a magician like myself, that could mean consciously stepping towards more of the lower energies, as you just suggested, and or consciously stepping more into the king, which means to be more of a nurturing presence in people's lives, to bless people, to bring harmony and vision, which is a very different quality to seeing the patterns and helping them tune their consciousness to a different, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So how do you do that? How do you consciously connect more deeply to one archetype?
I just had a magpie fly into my window.
Oh, wow. That's not a sign.
Bit of a bang. Maybe they even heard it on the recording.
Yeah, I did hear it. So.
Oh yeah.
Yes, it was pretty loud.
Wow. Yeah. So there are many ways you can seek out people that you see embody that archetype and learn from them. You can invoke the archetype. One of the things that we do in Reclaiming Your Throne is we teach them how to do an archetypal invocation. So it's a kind of prayer that consciously invokes the archetypal energy. So it may be something like, "Dear warrior, thank you for helping me set boundaries. Thank you for giving me discipline, for giving me loyalty and integrity. I seek your support in this moment because I feel scared and I need more of your courage. Show me how to serve kind of thing." Like it can become quite a powerful thing to do for you on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Movies can be quite powerful. Dreams can be powerful. Journaling. Taking up areas of study associated with an archetype can be important. Your morning ritual can be archetypally inspired, so that, for instance, you have a morning ritual that is strong in the warrior, would mean a lot of physical exercise. It would mean a cold shower. It would mean getting your shit together in your own, clean up all of the chaos so that you can have a zen mind as you approach the day. And that things like that. Yeah.
It's fascinating to see the rituals that I do and start to relate them to the archetype.
Yeah, what do you find?
Well, for example, I've been doing the Wim Hof method a lot, if you know it.
Yeah.
Deeper.
Yeah, that's warrior.
And then push-ups and cold shower, so a lot of warrior, and it helps me a lot. And while you were talking, I remembered that for some time in the last few weeks, I did invocations of the king energy, because I noticed that was something that was lacking in me. And it's actually helped me a lot to slow down and realize, wow, actually everything is going really well. Before there was this kind of franticness of I need to, something has to change. But with connecting to this calmness of the king and this, there's something fatherly in it that is like, hey, everything is fine.
Yeah.
And when I connected more to that, I realized how well things are actually going, and I could enjoy it more and see the harmony. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Glad to hear things are going well.
Yeah, me too. It's powerful stuff. It's yeah. I'm curious how you started going so deep into this.
That's a good question. I just discovered it randomly on some podcast. I don't exactly remember where it was. I wonder if it was a podcast that Adam Gilad did back in the days. He's some American guy who does men's work. I'm not entirely sure, but I think he had an expert in this back in the days, and I was intrigued more than a decade ago. And that was, that happened at a time in my life where I had come to terms with um, sort of the core, the, the source of angst, if you will, in my life.
Mm-hmm.
That I realized that all of this spiritual practice that I've been doing wasn't really about enlightenment at all, which is what I told myself, that I was on a serious spiritual path and I wanted to become a Buddha, which I can smile at now.
Mm-hmm.
But I had come to realize through a series of events on a pilgrimage in India that I had been running away from myself, and that my work now lay in the domain of figuring out who the hell I am. And I happen to be a man. And that became important for me for some reason, that I'm not only human, but I'm a man. And not long after that pilgrimage, I ended up in a relationship with a Norwegian woman, and we had movie nights every now and then, and we were watching 2 movies that night, and they were unlikely movies for hatching the idea that I had. But we watched Mrs. Doubtfire and Aaron Brockovich. Very unlikely movies for this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But in both of those movies, I saw something. I saw that biker dude that was supporting Aaron Brockovich in that movie, who sort of fully compromised his freedom. And I understood when he was looking at the bikers driving down the highway into, a world of opportunity. I understood from some deeper place in me that longing for freedom, something distinctly masculine about it. And this guy had sacrificed his life essentially to be taking care of the children of Aaron Brockovich, who was on a purpose that in that moment he realized he couldn't do that any longer. And that was I think that was the first time that I had a genuine experience of what it means to be a man. I saw him in that moment. And I understood what was going on. I had been clueless, I didn't understand what masculinity was at all. But then, I'm like that. I can feel that in me. Wow. And then I saw this other guy, Robin Williams, who's this father that refuses to grow up, and he's just he's just chronically juvenile, and he loses access to his children because of it. But to regain access, what he does is that he dresses up as this elderly lady that becomes the nanny, the house, what's it called, the maiden or whatever, nanny I suppose it's called, of the family. So he goes undercover as a woman to see his children. And that just blew me away as an idea, that this man was so immature in his masculinity that he had to become a woman in order to get access to what he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Blew me away, man. Really blew me away. And for whatever reason, those 2 movies impacted me in just the right places. And so I dedicated myself to writing about masculinity in the movies, and I set up this website. And somehow my interest in role-playing games and fairy tales, mythology, Greek mythology, I was a sucker for it when I was little. So eager, just consume these books, combined with the discovery of the archetypes and my recent understanding of, hey, I want to know what it means to be a man. Then that was the green light for a process that's now been going for more than a decade.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm curious about, both for myself and I think also for many viewers, is if my setup is to be, and I'm imagining you can relate as well, if my setup is to be quite sensitive. So to take in a lot from the outside and just constantly be processing the amount of information that comes through.
Yeah.
What would be something you could tell me, for example, in relationship to the archetypes? What could help me in balancing that or in finding more centeredness and stability with that sensitivity? Also in a way that doesn't reject it, because I think that's something that many men do as well, to pretend they're not sensitive.
Yeah. Are you talking about just being generally sensitive, or are you talking about these 20% of people that are like HSV, highly sensitive, or HSP, highly sensitive person?
I'd say in a way both, because for me it's like it's a gradual thing. But I mean, for simplicity's sake, maybe it's easier to talk about these 20% who,
Yeah. So maybe you and I are both one of these 20%. I think that I might be, because I take in a lot of information from my environment. Just like a glance of the eye or a flick of a wrist or the way someone moves their hair, and all of a sudden I'm tracking the patterns. It's not really something that I have conscious control over. It just seems to be innate. And maybe I could sort of exile that part of me, but I don't think I want to, because somehow it's a bit of a superpower,
Totally.
So I think that I don't even know if we're born with this level of sensitivity, or if it's developed through early childhood experiences, or how it is. But it seems to me like this kind of person is very naturally aligned to more of a magician archetypal energy. Because having a lot of information, from the environment, that very quickly we start to analyze and interpret and all these things, they tend to, that is a magician theme. And so one of the challenges of that diagnosis, if you will, is to not become too fascinated by it. I think it's one of the things that I've noticed with highly sensitive people is that since they can often have a lack of self-worth or feel quite scared of the world because they're so overwhelmed by the world, they might start to value their sensitivity in a way that actually makes them grandiose and feel special. And then you're kind of screwed. Then you have made the biggest mistake that you can make, because I think a lot of spiritual people have a tendency to spiritualize their wounds. That instead of owning that I'm kind of broken, or I maybe broken isn't the best way of putting it, but I'm deeply wounded, or I'm afraid of the world, or whatever. Instead of owning that in a very simple way, I will say that, the rest of the world is not as evolved as I am, and one day maybe everyone, whatever, So that is very important. Don't think
victim
that
mode is in there.
Yeah, it's a victim that fools itself into becoming grandiose.
Yes.
So it's a superiority complex that comes from an inferiority complex. I think as well that it's important to actually know your limits, so that you don't expose yourself to environments that you can't handle, and that you take time when necessary to rebalance. But as well, I think there's a lot of small print and caveats and pitfalls with this, because this again could become a story that leads to me not challenging myself to actually have the life that I want to have.
Yeah.
But I think when I ensure that I have a healthy body, that I take care of my health, and I do what I can to have money in the bank and have good friends and love in my life, then people will be able to deal with this just fine, you know. So, and at that stage when people have powered up the other domains, if we say that this HSP thing is more of a magician, then you power up the other, the body and the love, the relationships, the money. Then that's the point at which it will start to become like that can be the very thing that is your gift to the world.
Yeah. At which point the wound becomes like a spiritual gift, but it's because I went really into it and not avoiding it by making a story out of it that gives the rest of the world the fault for my wound or something like that. But I mean, in a way, the wound is strongly connected to my gift.
Yeah, you know, there is a way of looking at it, sort of an alchemical principle, a very Jungian kind of line of thinking that I like a lot. That my wound is the source of my gift. So the core wound becomes a sacred wound.
Yeah.
So for me, that's true, and it seems to be a very powerful frame for the people that I work with. Like, okay, so you're wounded. Don't run away from it, for God's sake. Go into it. Acknowledge it, own it, see the kind of hurt and misery and pain it's given you, and stay there until you have fully assimilated sort of the wisdom and whatever it is to be found there. And when that happens, you have a core competency that is very unique to you, and that you can make a lot of money from, and you will find through entering fully into the wound. You will be able to find the key to belonging. You know, all of a sudden you belong to the world in a different way. You're not the freak.
Is that by integrating the wound in a way, by making it part of who I am, my setup, owning it?
Well, I don't. What do you mean? Like exactly making the wound part of who I am?
Because, I mean, I can speak from my experience that, you know, having a particular wound and then believing that I am flawed because of that wound, because something happened to me, this is the reason I'm not enough, and no one can know that this happened to me because that is the reason I believe I'm not good enough. And so if I learn to turn that into, this is my history, and regardless of whether I believe that it happened for a reason or not, I'm owning my history, and I'm stepping up to take care of myself and to turn it into the best thing that I can do. It becomes part of who I am. It's like, yeah, this happened. It doesn't define who I am, but it's part of me. It's how I am in the world and what I respond to, what I'm interested in.
Great. So the reason I asked a clarifying question there is that I was wondering if you asked the question in such a way that, you know, I identify with the wound, then I sort of attach to it. Yeah. And that is not the way. But the way that I understood that you conceptualize it is very good. It's to own it in a wakeful, aware way without necessarily needing to communicate to everyone how fucking wounded I am, you know, because who wants that? Some moaning victim, you know, party pooper that just wants to be seen all the time. That's just the pain in the ass. So, you know, I'm going to bring in a little bit of Reclaiming Your Throne, which to make it more practical and hands-on, because you said something really good, and it made me think about, I don't exactly remember the words, but it made me think about this passage The 3-month journey is we go into the underworld, and on round 9 we just entered the underworld, and things are getting intense for the men. But they're brave, and they're willing to move on, and they've done good work and good preparation. So they're standing there at the threshold of their initiation, and some of them are scared, and some of them are eager, and I've told them this by now, that there is a way that you have been wounded. They have mapped that out in order to hold that in their awareness. And there is a way that they have designed their life to keep them from feeling the wound. So strategies of numbing and of distraction that are introduced, designed in order to make me feel more normal, more functional, more safe. The thing is, as long as we're running away from it, we will never have the opportunity to fully individuate, because we haven't faced those demons in the dark corners of our psyche. And so, so the image I offer them is that somewhere deep in yourself, deep in the deepest part of the underworld, there's a baby. That baby is you. You're that baby, and you have exiled this little boy or little girl from your psyche. You don't want anything to do with him, because the level of vulnerability that he feels makes you either filled with disgust or anger or despair or any number of things. For a quote unquote strong man, they probably despise their vulnerability. They would be completely disgusted by it. And so down there is, in a way, the most precious part of you, completely alone, completely in the dark, completely terrified. Yeah. And on top of that, you're building your life, and you're hoping that it will be a joyful, happy success, which is pretty fucking ignorant. It's not gonna work, because at the very bottom is a secret that even you can't face any longer, let alone everyone else. And so in order to keep that secret, we, or the innocent part of us, the wounded young part of us, and this is a bit creepy, but it's how I see it happen, it hires demons to protect it. And so this is how I sort of paint it in a very poetic, very sort of, what's it called, vivid way, that you have this baby at the bottom of the basement, and then there are these stairs, and then there's a doorway, and at the doorway stands some vicious beast with fangs and swords and wings, and go away, here but no further. And so when you come close to this place with someone else in intimacy, it can get fucking hairy, dude. It can get really fucking hairy. And these demons will flare up with feral hatred, and they would, like, murderous fucking hatred that will come out, because ultimately what that demon is protecting is a secret so raw, so vulnerable, that no one can fucking know. And that's how we have designed our lives. And we have all of these numbing mechanisms. We have all of these evasive strategies. We have all of these make-believe stories, this bullshit that we tell ourselves about who we are. And on Reclaiming Your Throne, the men strip it all the way down to the bone, and they're just left with the truth of that thing, whatever it is, that little child down at the bottom of their psyche. And those demons, they are also typically expressing through addictions. So that's one of the things that we do. We just strip them away. And for some reason that I still don't understand, we are creating an atmosphere on our training that actually allows the men to fully strip them away for a period of time,
Mhm.
which puts them straight into the fire of alchemy. And it can be frigging intense, but it's the kind of thing that you have to do if you want to be reborn into a more conscious, powerful version of yourself. So that's a little peek into reclaiming your throne.
That was powerful. Thank you. I could see your. It felt very powerful when you brought the demon in and embodied it, and I could see how enacting these different or embodying these different energies as a way to bring them really alive and make it tangible what's actually going on in the psyche, which can be hard to grasp or to conceptualize, is so powerful.
It is. It is. I agree.
And it's a fascinating lens to look at myths and movies and fairy tales as doing just that, as externalizing these different things, conflicts going on in our psyche.
Yeah. It's evocative, it's inspiring. It's a take into the ultimate conclusion. It's also fucking terrifying. So it's in a way, every story, every book, every movie is a window to your soul, and it's a powerful way of looking at it. And when you can start looking at it that way, I think it's your life and your understanding, your penetrating insight about who you are. It starts growing, and you start understanding that your soul, your unconscious, speaks in symbols, and it keeps calling. It keeps calling to you because something in you has not been integrated, right? And so this is why it's very helpful to see what keeps recurring in your consciousness and where you get stuck again and again. What do you judge? What do you despise? Very, very good. If you judge something, follow that breadcrumb trail from the object of your despise right back home. And there you have it, your inner tyrant that you have exiled into the shadows, or you have the inner victim that you cannot stomach to look in the face, or whatever it is. It's really all that is going on in the world when it comes to all of these polarization. It's just people who are unwilling to become whole, sovereign people, and in a way, if I may talk a little bit about the world situation, the theater of conflict. It seems to me that that we are in the final throes of adolescence as a species, where we are still convinced that I'm struggling because someone else made me, right? Like my mama, my daddy, my President Trump, and it's, we all do it. I do it, though. It's a very disempowering, irresponsible way of looking at it. And this frame that we've been stepping into with the archetypes and understanding shadow and that kind of a thing can help you to reclaim that which you have given away for some reason, maybe to feel safe or to have it easy. You can be a victim because you want to have an easy life. Actually, it's quite a taboo thing to say these days, but that is one of the things that happens a lot. Mm-hmm. So I hope that frame is helpful, even though it's there's a lot of information. And do you have any more?
I have a lot more, but yeah, actually, one thing that I had as a question, and I'm having the time and awareness of the time. Say we have like 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, what happens when you become integrated? Obviously,
What
that's what
happens?
we're moving towards, right? To dive back into the shadow and bring to light the things that we haven't integrated.
Yeah.
For what?
Yeah, good question. And I can't speak to this from as a person who's done that. I can just speculate what it's like. I mean, I think whenever you have a peak experience, maybe that's a moment of integration or some such thing. I think it makes sense to conceptualize it in that way. Um, I think it's important, David, to again to not make it that special. Like we're not doing it to become divine, angelic, superhuman, the king of the world, whatever. I think we're doing it to become ourselves fully. Like it's very, very simple, very grounded.
Yeah.
And maybe that makes us divine, that we're ourselves fully, it probably does. But
Yeah.
honestly, I trust a person more that just wants to be fully human than the person that keeps talking about how they're so divine. That tends to be a bypass.
I just find it fascinating how strong this pull can be towards integrate this desire to become integrated, because it's a difficult process. It's painful.
Yeah,
It's gradually taking on more and more responsibility. So,
yeah.
it's why do we do this?
Hmm. Gradually taking on more responsibility while at the same time not killing off our playfulness and innocence. You know,
Yeah.
it's so there's a lot of challenging things. You know, there's a lot of paradoxes and dilemmas and seemingly irreconcilable dynamics, like being powerful and being vulnerable at the same time, for instance, is something that messes with people's minds. Um, Again, your question is why? I think that every person needs to find their own why, man.
Mhm. Maybe what makes me curious is, obviously, becoming an integrated person will not be the image I have it on my in my mind, or like this
Oh,
idea
certainly not. Yeah,
of
yeah,
what it means to be happy, or it's something
yeah.
completely different. So this in a way, there's a tension between these two.
Interesting. I think I'm going to bring in some material from Reclaim again,
Go ahead.
which is, you know, there's quite a bit of darkness in reclaiming a throne, and I think that's needed because there is a death process involved. Then it goes towards more light and the opportunity aspirations. But initially, we have to face the dark. And one of the things that's always important to me to tell the men of every round is abandon all hope.
Mhm.
And like even saying it, I feel a bit like squeamish, you know, because it's uh, it's not the nicest message, especially when you've invested a lot of time and money in a program that you think is going to give you this thing that you want. And but then I tell them, you know, abandon all hope, because any hope that you may have is connected to the person you currently are, and you don't want to be him any longer.
Yeah.
In other words, if you want to create a strategy to become a person that you hope will be more functional, more well adjusted to the world, and you're creating that strategy from the very identity that has created the limitations in the first place, it's like the cliche of Einstein. You can't solve a problem from the same consciousness that created it. And I don't want what I'm saying to be taken in such a way that people shouldn't make an effort. But I think there's a juncture that repeats at regular intervals of our life, where the truth is that I am just simply incapable of making the transition.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I need events that are greater than me or people who are wiser than me to help me. Most likely. Sometimes I am too stubborn, so I will be helped by illness or loss or disease or whatever instead. That's not ideal, but that is a lot of the time what makes people wake up.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that is a paradox. You want to be this more integrated person. You cannot even hope to conceptualize who that's going to be.
Yeah. I
So
think
what do you do?
that's for me, the juncture is, am I willing to follow my desire, but let go of the image that it's connected to?
I like that.
Because the desire is what is, is what's pulling me or what's moving me. But the image is
Yeah.
what's in a way holding me back, because I'll constantly look at my path and be like, oh, but this is not how it's supposed to be happening. Maybe I'm doing this wrong, which I think can hold us back. Yeah, can hold us in the same patterns of like, okay, so this is not good, because maybe it feels uncomfortable at first. So, so it wasn't the right thing.
It's bound to feel uncomfortable, which is what makes this follow your desire sentence. There needs to be a caveat there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you talk about desire, people will often associate it with things like follow your bliss and it's going to be easy kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, every time you're going to be stepping into a larger life for yourself, it's never easy. It's very hard. And if you don't apply, shall we say, the warrior archetype as well as the lover to the process, which is one way to conceptualize it, then you probably won't get what you. Again, it's tricky. You won't get what you want, but basically you will not get what you want if you do it right. If it's gonna be different. It's gonna be different than what you think you want.
Yeah, I like how you brought in the lover and the warrior archetype, because the way I conceptualize it for myself is, can I love the process? Can I enjoy the process in a way that is not holding me back of the motion that I'm in and the direction I want to go into? So can I both hold the beauty of what is happening, but also move towards the goal, keep going and say, but I want to get there?
I got confused.
I'll try again. So for me, the way you were describing to access both the lover archetype and the warrior archetype in this process, maybe it's different from how you understand it, but for me, it's the lover connects me to what is beautiful now, to enjoy the present, to be with the beauty that is around me now. Like, I don't need to get somewhere else to feel good. I can feel good now.
Yeah.
Whereas the warrior is like, I'm going to get what I need. I'm going to get what I want. I'm going to move towards this goal.
Yeah.
And then I can rest. But until then, I will push through any challenge.
Yeah. And what's the question?
It wasn't a question. It was more of how I would frame it from a non-archetypal perspective, to just say, remember that the beauty is not only in the result and in the pushing, but also in slowing down at times, or just connecting with the beauty of the process, even when it's messy, even when it's difficult, even when it's painful.
I agree, man. It's very important. Very important. And that, in a way, sometimes I think that talking about it in an archetypal way is just a layer between what we're talking about and the reality of it. Because what it means simply, we can talk about the lover archetype, or we can talking about taking a day off, you know, just don't do anything. Enjoy, cuddle with your woman, play with your kids if you have them, you know, make a nice meal, whatever. And we're talking about very basic day-to-day experiences. Like we don't, I think there's a danger in this archetypal language of making it sound esoteric.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're talking about, as I'm sort of pursuing, shall we say that I'm pursuing my purpose, and I need my warrior, because otherwise I won't make progress. I need to be disciplined. I need to be strategic. I need to be regimented, proactive. You know, I need to have faith, courage, all of these things. And then I can do that every fucking day of the week, 364 days a year, 5 even, and then just like go, proactive.
I can do it.
I can do this. I haven't been making progress for 10 years, but I'm almost there now. Almost there. You know? And this is the kind of thing, you know, where people think that just working hard will get them where they want. But it's not the truth, you know. It's like, this is one of the things that every disciplined, stubborn worker needs to learn, that our minds, our creativity, our capacity to see beyond, you know, the nose to the grindstone mentality, that comes when I let go. You know, it's the Archimedes moment, you know, Eureka, you know, in the bathtub. And finally, you know, he just gives himself a break. And then, so a lot of the big discoveries, you know, have been scientific, whatever, philosophical. You will hear the stories of how someone has applied themselves with discipline for so fucking long, and now they're just worn out. They're absolutely worn out, and they haven't made progress. But they have invested the requisite energy into solving the problem. But now the solution, the next step of the purpose work, is to actually let go and let the imagination, the creative principle, whatever that is innate in all of us, take over. You know, so I think that's an example of how this warrior-lover balance works. And so for me, for instance, I've now finally, I've taken like Saturdays just religiously off, you know, nothing, no work. And I started only 1 or 2 weeks ago. And the first time I woke up on a Saturday knowing that this was the truth, I felt like a kid on Christmas Eve. I felt so great, you know, like, wow, like my body was getting energy from just knowing that I can relax. So nice.
Beautiful. Cool. Before we come to an end, Eivind, how can people find your work? How can they connect to you?
Couple of ways. Inner-throne.com is our website. When you go there, you will find information. There will be a little pop-up that comes up where you can subscribe to an ebook where you get the introduction to Reclaim Your Inner Throne, as well as the most concise introduction to King, Warrior, Magician, Lover that you'll find anywhere. That will come up. You'll have an opportunity to register to that. So I think that will be really, really good to dive into if you're interested. You can also come on the Reclaim Your Inner Throne community page on Facebook. And obviously we have exciting offers for you. We have a very powerful 3-month training. We have, I do coaching. There's the Inner Throne Academy will be launching, and there's tons of good stuff. So there's awesome. No lack of opportunity.
Sweet. Yeah, we'll put on all the links on the page of the interview so that people don't need to remember the names.
Yeah, cool.
Great. Eivind, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing some of your knowledge.
Yeah, thank you for your invitation, David. I'm glad you're doing this. It's quite exciting. that more and more of these summits are happening around the world, and that people like yourself are taking leadership. Yeah, so good on you. Yeah, hope it turns out to be a huge success.
I'm sure it will. Thank you.